We are communicating more than ever and have all the tools to do that, but that doesn't mean we're necessarily aligning better.
Welcome to Design Nerds Anonymous, the podcast that sparks curiosity at the intersection of business and design. I'm your host, Amanda Schneider, founder of ThinkLab, speaker on TED.com, and author of the new book, Work for What's Next. In this episode, we're focusing on two more themes from the book: communication and collaboration. We now have 3 times as many meetings as we did just a few years ago. More channels, more tools, more messages. Hybrid work didn't create that pressure, but it certainly revealed it. Today, that communication either builds velocity among your team or it builds friction. So to help me unpack these challenges today, I'll be joined by Dr. J.J. Peterson. He's the former head of StoryBrand and one of the leading voices in modern messaging, helping organizations eliminate confusion and move people to action. And Gideon Spitzer-Williams, who leads global experiential marketing for Canva's B2B organization, serving more than 200 million users worldwide and shaping how teams communicate at global scale. Together, we'll explore how clarity accelerates teams, why AI should amplify wisdom, not replace it, and how to design communication systems that create momentum instead of noise. Here's my conversation with Dr. JJ and Gideon. Welcome, Dr. JJ, our first repeat guest, and Gideon. And I'd love to start by inviting each of you to introduce yourselves and one word to describe the future of communication and collaboration at work, kind of given the path that we're on today. So Dr. JJ, I'm going to start with you.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be back. I'm Dr. J.J. Peterson. I run a marketing ad agency called Conscious Brand Agency, and I was the head of StoryBrand for about 10 years with StoryBrand and Donald Miller. And what I do is I help companies communicate, tell amazing stories in their marketing using a story framework. As I have been diving in and working with a ton of different companies, the future for me of communication is one word I would use would be exciting.
Exciting. Love that. And tell us a little bit about your podcast.
Yeah, my podcast is called Badass Softy. And it's really for people who are unapologetically driven, but also want to lead with heart. So it's about leadership and communication and marketing, really trying to figure out, like, how do we actually change the world, but do it in a way that we don't lose our soul.
Gideon, I'd love for you to go next.
Yes, thank you for having me. I feel like I need to start a podcast myself now. Yeah, I'm Gideon. I lead global experiential marketing for Canva's B2B motion. So I've spent my career across agencies, CPG, certainly my tour to tech, largely focused on impacting Gen Z. But now my work is really focused on helping businesses understand how Canva can really help them in the modern day workplace. So this whole conversation is very relevant to my current job and formerly in previous roles. The future word for me is clarity. And, at Canva, we talk a lot about going from chaos to clarity and how fast you can do that. And I think as teams scale, tools multiply, AI, the real advantage is when we can quickly understand what matters, why it matters, and then what to do next with that.
Most people have heard of Canva, but in case some of our listeners have been living under a rock, would you give us a quick overview? What is Canva?
Yes, Canva is a visual communication platform. So we have everything from presentation tools to video editors, Word documents. It's used by well over 200 million people globally, everything from K through 12 to your large, Fortune 500 businesses.
We're users here at ThinkLab as well. So
love that. Appreciate that.
So I love your words, exciting and clarity. And I think that that's exactly what we need as we look at the title of this episode is Communication and Collaboration for the New Rhythm of Work. This whole season 10 of Design Nerds Anonymous, is part of my gift to the world, I hope, which is a new book titled Work for What's Next. So I'd love to dive into this and just ask, what is one core idea from the 2 chapters that I sent you that aligns well with your work, and how would you build on it? Gideon, maybe I'll start with you here.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, so many of the core ideas, I think largely protecting time and attention. And that came through a bunch of different ways with, time boxing for deep work, defining creative hours, modeling boundaries. And that's not only my time and attention, but that's my teams and the teams I work with, I think will help create that space for the deep work. At Canva, we also say a lot about doing fewer things well. So really having a lot more of that focus, I think, will help with that clarity, which kind of goes back to that future word.
Well said.
I mean, I love that. And especially when I think we are so distracted these days, that being able to protect and create boundaries is so important. And part of it that kind of stood out for me from your chapter is the idea that we have shorter attention spans, fewer chances to be in the rooms together. So there's the necessity to be more and more clear, which is kind of what Gideon's word was, is this idea of having to be more clear in your communication. And I think that especially like when we can't see each other face to face and on Zoom, the clarity around communication is so key. And one of the things that I do when I'm working with companies and leaders is really help them understand that whenever you're communicating clearly and you're working with somebody else, you have to realize that they are living a story and they are the hero of the story. When we're in this great space together, Amanda's the hero of her story, Gideon's the hero of his story, I'm the hero of my story. And a lot of times we can't see each other and there's more opportunity to be unclear. We have to get people's attention quickly. And the way we have to do that is understand, like even in this space, why is Amanda here? What does she want? How do I help her achieve what she's going to get? When I start with those principles of understanding that the people I'm communicating with are the heroes of the story, then we actually can communicate more quickly, more clearly, and actually get people on board and help them achieve their goals and the company goals even faster.
A mentor of mine once said to me that everyone is working on the most important thing at the company. And I think that really resonated because I believe one of the other notes was formatting for the audience. You know, while we also have our own perspectives, a CMO cares about very different things than a CFO or a Gen Z starting out in their career, right? So you have to be able to format it and show them different things that they may want to see or, you know, take out things that they don't need to see.
I love in your chapter where you talk about how really having to start with the hook whenever you're communicating with anybody of why does it matter to the people you're talking to. So when, you know, you were just saying, Gideon, about like a CMO or a CFO, I talk to companies all the time where they go, you know, they're trying to send out an email that says, hey, everybody, I need you to sign up for this and do this by this date. Okay, well, if you start with that, like, here's what I need you to do or the company needs you to do, and there's no hook to why it matters to the person, it's already unclear the urgency around it, why I need to be involved, and the clarity for them about why it matters is lost. Mm-hmm. And so if you don't start with understanding why does it matter to them, what is their story they're trying to live, and how do I hook them in the beginning, it's all lost to begin with.
And less likely to be acted on. What's interesting to me about all this is really trying to push that action. And if it feels painful or adds stress, it's going to be something I want to avoid doing rather than do. You know, as I'm listening to you guys talk, and it was interesting editing your own work, I realized how much I reuse words. Clarity was one that I was like, oof, I gotta work some of these out of there. That's too much. But another one was intentionality. And this feels like a real paradox on this communication collaboration because Dr. JJ, as you're talking, like reframing all this takes time, but the time is the one thing that we feel like we don't have. As AI and some of these technologies come in, it's going to create more noise, not less. So I feel like we are just hitting the accelerator button and going faster and faster and faster. So I'd love for either of you to build on this. How do we create time for more intentionality?
For me, it's even less about the how and about just understanding that there is a need, right? That it actually, the intentionality and the connection has to be there. And I think we actually say, well, we don't have time. Things are moving too quickly. And because of that, we lose a lot of the intentionality, a lot of the connection. We sacrifice connection and intentionality for efficiency. And I think we can have both. I mean, I'm not saying one is worse than the other, but in this new age of things moving so quickly, I think we've sacrificed some of that connection and intentionality for efficiency. And you can be that way, but the reality is the research shows that connection, joy, whimsy actually improves quality of performance and creativity, and also allows us to recover from hard things. So if we're not taking the time to actually create some intentionality, build relationship, connect with people on a human level, even though we're trying to be efficient, we lose the advantage of efficiency because people can no longer be creative, connected, joyful, recover from stress.
I work with some incredibly ambitious people, and all of us on this call are as well. And I think one thing that AI does is it creates a lot of space for work, but that work should be meaningful, not just more work. So, I think that's something that I try and work with my team and any team at Canva of like making sure we don't have these tools so we can necessarily do a lot more of the busy stuff. It's so that we can have that more meaningful work and be more intentional. And I think that's where you get the time and space to say, okay, I need to craft this message this way for one person, different way for another person. And I think that is the most important unlock for me, because at first, what happened for me personally was, oh yes, this can analyze a spreadsheet. AI can analyze a spreadsheet or help me craft these emails or Slack messages or whatever. So I'm just going to send out a lot more of them and work faster. But then I actually was overwhelmed by it because I was just doing too much beyond my capacity, and I wasn't really like thinking thoughtfully about things.
What really prompted this in the original research that we did was with architecture and design firms. And we had a lot of leaders saying, we're really struggling with creativity. And you hear in the chapters, there's a lot around creativity in there. And it was one of these mind shift moments because one of the Gen Zers said, you know what, like we used to be able to travel to get inspiration and go to Florence and Rome and see all the beautiful architecture. And all of these leaders are saying digital is the problem. Well, Pinterest is not the problem. The problem is a time drought. The amount of meetings has tripled since the onset of the pandemic in 2020. And as we go back to the office and get more time in person, I think that we are seeing people try to force more of this togetherness time. But I'm curious from you guys, was there anything that challenged you to think differently, or one kind of new idea that this prompted that you'll carry forward in your work?
I mean, being really intentional about what needs to be in person and what needs to be async. Of course, there's value to us all getting on a call and brainstorming something. It's not something I can necessarily do myself all of the time, but I think not just defaulting to this should be a meeting, or yes, this project should have a weekly call. That simple unlock I hope will give me hours back a week.
I will say one thing in that from the communication side when it comes to meeting is one of the things that you talk about in there is that you have to start, kind of already mentioned it, start with the hook of why this matters to people, and then bring your credibility to the meeting. Why should you listen to me? I think a lot of times when we hop into meetings, because we're trying to be so fast, you almost have to puff up yourself and get right to the point instead of pausing at the beginning and going like, why does this matter to the people in the room? Mm-hmm. And that was just something, a really good reminder that it's not just for like when you're communicating to customers or outside, but with your team. Like pause and go, why does this matter before I actually prove that I'm the boss? That's really key for me. And then the other piece, when it just kind of, when you're talking about meetings and creativity in general, I've been doing a lot of research around joy and how joy actually impacts our creativity and alignment and ability to overcome hard things as a team. And when we create back-to-back meetings where we've got to get a bunch of stuff done, and everybody's so concerned about getting people off of Zoom because it's like, all right, we're just going to take 15 minutes because the deep work is so important and all that other stuff. I understand that. But what the studies show is that when you make space in meetings in particular and connection with people for surprise, whimsy, connection of relationship, redemptive perspective on suffering, all of those things, when you actually make space for that in meetings, even if it's just a couple minutes, what you do is you actually allow people to work faster, better, and more creative.
When you do have that meeting, how can you prepare for it and be as visual as possible within that meeting? One of my least favorite things to do is go over a Word doc brief to an agency over a meeting that they could have read beforehand. And no surprise here at Canva, we really focus a lot on visual communication. So a lot of our ideas are structured in the format of decks or some sort of visual that can communicate it an idea or a path or whatever a bit clearer. And when you do that and you have, visuals on a page, I think often I find that helps the conversation go a little smoother, get the point across. It sort of gets people, their creative minds thinking a bit more.
I'm so proud to introduce Mannington Commercial and Cindy Coffin as a Season 10 sponsor of Design Nerds Anonymous. Mannington and Cindy herself have been alongside me, not only in the research, but also in the writing of this book.
Mannington Commercial has been a longtime sponsor of DNA. And one of the reasons I'm so proud of that is because DNA is the voice of our industry.
I'm so thrilled that you've been a partner for so long on DNA. What are the changes that you think people are struggling to solve?
It's a tough time to be a designer because you're dealing with a lot of information, but the responsibility lies on the shoulders of our industry for a great deal of what our future as a civilization looks like.
What is Mannington Commercial doing to really address some of these challenges?
We are committed to being fully transparent with everything that we do and the way that we do it. So that transparency really supports designers having access to all of the information that they need to make the right decisions clearly and plainly and transparently as possible.
If you could invite our podcast listeners, what would you say to them?
I think human beings are the differentiator. So I invite you to connect with a Mannington Commercial rep to learn more, not just about our new products, but how we think and how we show up for you as your design partner.
Do we have to be in person to spark joy? And I'll caveat this with, I built a company that is virtual first. We do meet up in person, but more retreat style. I am closer to these women that I built this company with than any group that I have worked with in a physical location. We've been able to get close. So I'd love to really tackle this idea of the balance of synchronous and asynchronous, because I think that's at the core of, again, this paradox and some of the challenge we're facing right now is it feels unnatural to some of us that don't naturally think digital first.
I think it's more of a mindset shift of saying, how do I dance with this? How do I dance to lean into the relationship and lean into the joy and see that as part of sparking the creativity and the work, the ambition that the company has? Those are not separate things. They work together. And then also in those moments where it's like, let's be okay also putting our heads down and getting crap done together or individually. And there's a little bit of a dance that happens with those things. So balance is less a priority for me these days, and more how to figure out how to artfully connect them together to be incredibly ambitious. It's not just about let's hug and connect. It's about how do we move together as a team in a way that actually changes the world. Let's give more gifts to more people, serve them better, and do it at a speed and quality that is going to actually make a difference.
The thing I'd build onto that perhaps is that everyone dances a little bit differently. And I think that certainly is something I appreciate at Canva is you're free to work however you please. We have a policy called, it's not even really a policy, but it's called remote flexible. So like LA, we don't have an office here, but in Sydney or Austin where you do have an office, you don't have to go in. You can if you want. You can stay at home, whatever works best for you. And I think as our lives, certainly with Gen Z, are continuing to blend, work and personal, it's really like however you can get the job done, do it in the most efficient and impactful way. And I think that is where, when you don't feel, my personal case, when you don't feel that sort of restriction or a company trying to put me into a box of you have to go into work or whatever, I think that's when I feel the freedom to do what works best for me. And that's different for every single person.
We look to Gen Z for a lot of the inspiration because they're naturally digital first, but it doesn't mean this is a book for Gen Z and we're trying to make Gen Z happy at the expense that all the other generations have to give something up. We're really trying to help integrate those.
I think we do have a lot to learn from Gen Z. I'm learning it every day, but I think they also have a lot to learn from us. And I say 100%. Us, meaning anyone, not them, right? Like work hasn't been that bad. We've been figuring it out for many years, and we can be better. And they're pushing us in that direction. But I think it is like a kind of symbiosis, a mutual relationship, which is important to note.
Gen Z, I think we have so much to learn from as far as where things are going and how to communicate differently and the tools that we can use. And there is a lot of fear, you mentioned in the book around AI, and as we look towards the future of 2050 of what the future could be for communication, those tools are going to be used more and more and more effectively. They're going to help us create communication faster, quicker, all those things. One of the things that I think for those of us who are a little bit older, I'm 50, I use those tools. But what I've come to realize in all of this is that, specifically for me, when it comes to creating things with AI or using AI is great at giving me information, but I have to bring the wisdom. My job in that communication is bring that humanity, my perspective, the subtlety. I have to curate the information that goes in and comes out. My job is to bring wisdom to that. And I think when we're talking about intergenerational communication, recognizing the wisdom that does come from Generation Z when it comes to the tools and the trends and the way things are moving is so important to recognize there's a level of wisdom in the younger generation that we want to pay attention to.
For sure.
But also not shrinking in our own wisdom and experience that we bring to the table to bring that humanity to the tools. Because if you just use the tools and don't use the wisdom, you sound like everybody else, and then it turns into white noise, whether that's an email, whether that's a PDF that you're putting out, whether that's a PowerPoint presentation or a video. You start sounding like everybody else if you're just using the tools that everybody else is using. But when you bring your own humanity and wisdom to the table in that communication and own that, those of us who are in the older generation, without being afraid of the tools, then I actually think the two work together to actually, again, be creative and move things forward at a pace that we've never seen before in history as far as what we're capable of creating and doing in these moments. But Gen Z has a wisdom in this space, and those of us who are a little bit older have wisdom over here, and allowing both of those to come together to be used to move things forward, I think that when I say the reason I use the word excited about the future is because of that. A lot of people, I feel like with AI, I get to be more human. And in my meetings and my presentations, I don't get to be less human. And in fact, the value of my humanity goes up. So I get to lean into my humanity and not worry about the crap that I used to have to worry about that now AI and other tools can take care of for me. I get to be human and I get to bring my wisdom. And that's the part that excites me about the moving forward of the future. And when we can help the next generation understand that as well, that even they have a point of view, they have wisdom, they have personal connection, bring that to the table in the communication and the future, then you just don't have to worry about the details of creating. You get to use AI for that, but that's what gets me excited about the future. I think it's more human, not less.
Boomers are the largest generation. They are retiring at an unprecedented rate. And my generation, Gen X, I am 46, is not going to fill their shoes because we're just a small generation. So we can't possibly fill that gap, which means millennials and Gen Z are going to have to step up sooner. And what I hear from a lot of leaders is they're not necessarily ready. So if you notice, every chart in the book shows perceptions across all generations, because I want to use this to drive those conversations with Gen Z as the spark, but the filter of the wisdom of some of our more seasoned generations, and give them a platform to really compare and contrast and host some of these dialogues so that we can all get to a better place. Because one of the challenges of reframing communication when an executive needs to hear it this way and a Gen Zer needs to hear it this way is we're trying to copy them all on the same email. So how do we customize everything for everyone time efficiently, but get that done in a way that doesn't sink us in trying to reframe everything too? So Gen Z is the spark, but wisdom as the filter. We talk in chapter 5, which you guys haven't gotten or read, about the shadow board, which I also mentioned in my TED Talk, that I think gives us really some frameworks to foster these dialogues between all generations and focus on a common end that maybe is a little bit better. Let me ask another question that really kind of gets to the dark side of some of this. And I know a little bit ago, we talked about productivity. And I'll say in a fully remote team, it's easy for us to get sucked into this productivity addiction. It feels so good to check off boxes. We have to be a little bit more intentional about making sure we create space and time for joy and how was your weekend, which naturally happens, I think, in the real world a little bit more. So what is your caution to all generations? What do we need to do differently to avoid maybe the dark side of some of these mental mind shifts that we're talking about in the book?
I think the most effective teams are multi-generational, and it's not just, Gen Z and millennial or Gen X or whatever, but not only multi-generational, also low ego. And I do believe visually first. My biggest caution is mistaking activity for progress. I think, that kind of goes to that clarity point that we've been circling around. We are communicating more than ever and have all the tools to do that, but that doesn't mean we're necessarily aligning better. And I think myself included, but I've seen Gen Z get particularly overwhelmed by too much communication and not knowing where to start. I think that shows up in probably every workplace. So yeah, I think that is just something to keep having a pulse on. I mean, going into that visual communication, even at Canva, we of course believe in that deeply, but the goal isn't necessarily more. It's helping get from that chaos to clarity a lot faster. We did some research of our own called State of Visual Communication, which is where we surveyed a few thousand people globally from Gen Z to executives. And we found that 66% of teams report clear and more efficient communication when they're visually fluent, which I think just reinforces that point on focus, not necessarily noise.
The crazy part is we have AI to help us, or these other tools, not just even AI, but like Canva, right? Like the way people used to organize things compared to how they do now, it's different. And we're saving more time. And so we're finding ways to fill that time and be even more busy and be more quote unquote productive. But a lot of times people don't know why they're being productive or what they're doing. So I think that's key in communication. But the thing that comes up for me when I hear like the idea of the dark side of this, of the productivity and what can happen, and it just staying in this in the thread I've been in with this joy side of things, is recognizing head down, deep work, productivity, getting stuff done is amazing. And I love it. It brings me joy. It brings my team joy when we do it. It's not a good or bad. Like productivity and staying busy is bad, and then rest time is good, and joy or whimsy is good. But again, what the research shows is that joy actually fuels the productivity. And so if you are only productive all the time and only head down all the time, there will be diminishing returns, not only on your productivity and output, but on your ability to be creative and ideate and problem solve. So there's one thing of like sitting down and typing something out. There's a whole other thing when you come up to a point of a problem and having to be creative to solve it. And if you are not taking time for yourself or your team and almost like putting it in as a priority to find joy, again, whimsy, relationship, wonder, seeing something beautiful or reading a fun book. It's not just about relaxing. It's actually about finding something that lightens us. So on a Saturday, when I am tempted to sit down and keep being more productive because I can write more, I can create more, I can do all these things, it's actually become a thing where I have to be careful of that dark side in me, because I do get joy from creation. If I just put my head down all the time, there will be a diminishing return very soon.
That word joy, I think, is so important. And I know you talk about a lot, which I'm so appreciative of. Like the amount of people that forget that we're doing our work 8+ hours a day. Like it should be joyful, right? Like we're spending the majority of our lives doing this. Being intentional about the things that you really love doing at work, and trying to, figure out how you can not do the things you hate or get through them quicker or whatever. I think that's so important. That really resonates with me.
And I think that is great advice to leaders, teams, and even individuals about the importance of this. And another stat that I share in the book is there has been a drop off in engagement in, I think it was a 2024 measure that was equal to the 2020 drop in engagement by the workforce, which means I think what's happening is we are headed towards a burnout cliff. And we see this in our research all the time. These teams that are working on projects for the built environment are struggling to keep up. They've got more projects than ever, with less resources than ever, more decision makers than ever to get approval. And we have had in the past year tears in research sessions. It ended up being more like group therapy, really trying to help these people kind of see that. So, leaders being really conscious of bringing joy, and direct line managers being really conscious of giving space, especially in this world that we're headed into where you can work anytime, anywhere, but all the time and everywhere. Just being really conscious about that is probably one of the best pieces of advice we can leave people with.
As the home of NeoCon for decades, the MART was built on the power of physical presence. You came to Chicago, you walked the floors, you experienced it in person. That foundation still matters, perhaps now more than ever, but we've also taken to heart the reality that how people engage has changed. ThinkLab's data shows that one of the things professionals value most at NeoCon is CEU education. Today, many more designers are accessing that content through our digital platform, dramatically expanding reach while strengthening the in-person experience. That shift wasn't about replacing what worked. It was about building upon it. We believe that leadership in this industry means the willingness to rethink, to evolve, and to serve our communities in new ways. For NeoCon 2026, we've introduced several new product offerings, including Illuminated NeoCon, a show within a show featuring design-focused architectural and decorative lighting, and the NeoCon Collab, a curated, multi-brand environment that will create an elevated, inspirational experience in our 7th floor exhibit hall. And we're proud to continue shaping what's next, together.
This season of Design Nerds Anonymous is supported by the MAV Group, an executive search and coaching firm in the design and furniture industry. I have personally seen how deeply they understand this community. Today, I'm joined by Angela Burke, CEO of the MAV Group. Angela, what are you hearing right now?
Well, the industry isn't just changing, it's changing hands. And leadership development cannot be an afterthought. Across firms, manufacturers, and dealerships, seasoned leaders are planning for what's next, while emerging leaders are stepping into significant roles faster than ever before. Creative excellence doesn't automatically translate to leadership excellence. So here at the MAV Group, we help organizations hire exceptional leaders and coach them to drive lasting impact. Because what's next for this industry isn't only about design, it's about leadership.
Learn more at themavgroup.com. The MAV Group, leaders for what's next. Two more quick questions, kind of rapid fire lightning round here. What is one key takeaway, a tangible idea for teams to try from the book that I shared, or maybe something that you would challenge our audience to do as a result of kind of some of the shifts in this book?
I've hit on it already, but the new communication pyramid, I just think the way that you structure it of whenever you're talking, when you're having meetings, when you're communicating, and again, this works up or down generationally. That's one of the things I love about your book. It's not, you walk into the generation stuff, but that's not what leads everything. So that makes me really happy. And just the idea that Gideon mentioned, like being prepared for a meeting. Before you get in there, understand, before you stand up in front of anybody, why does this matter to them? Before you talk about your credibility, why does it matter to them? Then why should they listen to you? And then ultimately towards the end, what do they need to do to walk away? And if people pay attention to that, that's actually built in what you've built there is based on story structure and story formula. It's actually you're telling people to create a short story, a short narrative before they walk in. And when you do that, the research shows that actually you will get more buy-in. It will change people's minds and actions in a way that just getting up and listing facts or statements won't do. When everybody buys this book, you need to look at that pyramid and you need to think about it before you walk into any kind of communication you have.
I love it. And I felt like for me, that's a real flip on how I naturally think as a Gen Xer. Like you introduce yourself and then you go through a timeline, and we don't have time for that today. So I love that one too.
And it's not effective.
It's not, especially in video, which I learned the hard way. Gideon, what would be your tangible idea?
Well, I have two, both based off of, certainly influenced by the lovely reading. The first is, around being really intentional about your audience and who you're presenting to. And this goes to, one of the hardest things I think is to get an idea on a page. But what's even harder is to get that idea on a slide, and that visual communication and how it kind of just forces you and puts these really nice guardrails to be really clear. Some other stats from our research was 91% of people say visuals communicate better than text, and 76% lose interest in text-heavy content. Now, there's a world and a place for that too, of course, but I think not always defaulting to text-heavy and being intentional and just thinking about what your audience really wants to see, and when they want to see it, whether that's async or on Zoom, I think is really impactful. My more spicy answer, which was not in the book, but more influenced, was that calendars should be marked as private. Your time is yours to protect. I think that is something that is just personally for me, I think it's really easy for someone to look at your calendar and take your time. And I'd rather people ask me for it. A little more spicy, but.
Ooh, I like it. And I used to, when I was an independent consultant starting this business that became ThinkLab, I used to say it's nobody's business if I'm with my kids or another client. So it was very, very private. I think when you work for a company, it gets a little bit different. People expect to be able to reach you and see you. So I love your spicy answer too. All right, last question. At the end of each of these shift chapters, I paint a picture of 2050. So given the discussion today, what is one word to describe the future if we get this right? We started with exciting and clarity. I want to push us to think maybe beyond those words to say, if we get this right and we really do it right, what could a better future look like?
The phrase that really stuck out to me, which I loved from the book, was the idea of AI as an amplifier, not a replacement. That actually is the thing that, again, in the communication space, everything we're talking about, AI is an amplifier, not a replacement. And I think when we hold to that, the 2050 is beautiful.
For me, my one word is sustainable. I don't think we're there yet. The goal isn't just to work better today. That's the short-term goal, but it's really to build ways of working that we can actually sustain over time, especially with all of these new tools, AI, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, how can we build something that brings that joy and that is sustainable for both work and personal life, and finding that, blend.
If we look at those words together, exciting, clarity, AI as an amplifier, sustainable, I think that's just a beautiful place to end here and a future that we all want to be a part of. Thanks to JJ and Gideon for a conversation that felt both grounding and catalytic. I'd say if there's one takeaway from this episode, it's this. More communication doesn't automatically create alignment. Clarity does, intentionality does, and trust does. Oftentimes, the tools aren't the problem, but the way that we use them determines whether teams build momentum or burn out trying. And that raises a bigger question. If work is moving faster than ever, who's preparing all of us to keep up? That's why next week, we'll turn to two more topics from the book, mentorship and learning. You'll hear from two of our interior design industry leaders at the helm of IIDA New York. That is the International Interior Design Association, and New York is the largest collection of interior designers anywhere in the country. They'll help us wrestle with what it really takes to grow talent, transfer wisdom, and build leaders in this industry and beyond before they're ready. Because in a world where experience is retiring and expectations are rising, this idea of mentorship, learning, and upskilling isn't optional. So if any of these conversations sparked ideas for you, your team, your clients, you'll find links in the show notes to order the book, Work for What's Next. And if you're thinking about trying to bring these conversations into your organization in a bigger way, possibly through workshops, keynotes, maybe a strategy session or some way to engage clients in your market, you can also learn more at the ThinkLab website, which is also linked in the show notes. So we can't wait to bring you episode 6 next week. Design Nerds Anonymous is a proud member of the Surround Podcast Network. Special thanks to our podcast production team, Rachel Senator and Rob Schulte.